Are you ready to untangle from your past, recover from heartbreak, and revive your life? This is Soul CPR with your host, Ann Papayoti. We've all had soul-crushing experiences and lost ourselves in our pain, but there is a way out. On this podcast, Amazon best-selling author, award-winning life coach, and advice columnist Ann Papayoti helps us navigate the path from heartbreak to healing. So now, please welcome the host of Soul CPR, Ann Papayoti.
Have you ever lost your job? Well, statistics tell us that 40% of Americans have or will at least once in their career span, and that 48% have layoff anxiety. So at least 48% worry about it. Well, today on Soul CPR, Healing Out Loud, we are going to talk about how losing a job might actually push you into your purpose. So today I am going to welcome my guest, Brian Krausen, who worked as a journalist at a major daily newspaper for about 27 years, a decade as a reporter and 17 years as a copy desk chief. And then in 2012, he was laid off. And after some months of uncertainty and reflection, he decided to change directions at the age of 50 and reinvent himself as an artist. After spending a decade developing his art skill and building a body of work, he published a book of his artwork. Goddesses Among Us, The Art of Brian Krausen, Volume 1 was launched on March 12, 2024. And we are going to talk about that beautiful book of art today. He and his wife, Suzanne, have been married 34 years this month, and they live in suburban Birmingham near their son, Matthew, and his partner, Krista. Brian, my friend and 8th grade classmate, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
All right, Brian.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, just saying 8th grade classmate just kind of brought a jolt back. You and I just went to this RLC, it was called Resource Learning Center school, just 1 year each, right? And it was
Right.
it was sort of a experimental school, if I remember correctly, where they brought kids out of different schools from Jefferson County system and fed into this one school. And anyway, we had the pleasure of getting to know each other and then reconnected via Facebook, as so many of us have. And I'm happy that we've reconnected. So talking about losing a job. And I think so many people can relate. As we said, 40% of Americans, I know we have listeners around the world, but I'm sure the statistics, are true for others as well. Take us back to 2012, if you will. What was it like losing your journalism job, your career so suddenly, and as you've shared with me in private, without any recognition?
Right. I'd been there my entire career since I'd graduated from college. And like you said, 10 years as a reporter, then briefly as a copy editor, and then the copy desk chief left, and I put in for the job and got it pretty soon after joining the copy desk, and was there for 17 years doing that job, presiding over the copy desk with all the stories coming through, even in election nights and all that kind of thing. And then a wave of layoffs hit the industry, specifically the chain that I worked for. Mm-hmm. And a bunch of people got laid off at the New Orleans Times-Picayune right before us. And then on the same day, they laid off people at my newspaper in Birmingham and the one in Huntsville and the one in Mobile. So they pretty much flooded the job market locally with people with my skill set, people who did the same kind of things that I did. And so in order to keep going in journalism, I would have had to probably move to another city, somewhere else, because it's pretty specialized kind of work.
Right.
And my wife needed to stay near her mother. So that wasn't a really good prospect. So I was kind of aimless for a while. and
Right.
didn't really know what I wanted to do. I'd already been kind of feeling kind of misplaced in journalism in the last few years. It was high stress during those years because we knew something was coming, because they, we quit having like annual cost of living raises, and things were getting tighter and tighter. They were doing early buyout retirement packages for some of the senior people. And then of course it got all of us, and they told us in the spring, okay, and you are being laid off. It was like 75% of the newsroom.
Oh,
And we had to stay, like we call ourselves the Walking Dead, until the fall when it actually hit. And then one
yeah.
day when we all just had to throw our badges in a basket at the door, and we were gone. So that's the way
Oh,
that went. So that was in September, and I was kind of just aimless and not sure what to do with myself
mhm.
until it was around January or February. And I've always drawn, sketched and drawn, margins of my school notebooks, and
Yeah.
since I was a kid, but I never really thought about being an artist for a living or for a career. As we talked about, um, I thought I was going to be I wanted to be a pilot. I
Okay.
applied for ROTC. My eyesight wasn't good enough, so I thought, shoot,
Mhm.
what am I going to do? So I decided to go into engineering like my father. My dad was a mechanical engineer, and I
Mhm.
tried that at college, and the math and science kind of wiped me out. I didn't do well in that, and I thought, well, what am I going to do? I'm not doing well in this. But I had a mechanical drawing class as in pre-engineering that I aced. I did really well in that because I can turn objects in my mind, which is most of what that class was, is being able to see something and see what would look like from another side.
Right.
And so um, I changed, but that salvaged my self esteem. But that should have pointed me toward art. But I failed to latch hold of that. And I took an interest inventory test, and I scored high in journalism. So I thought, well, okay, I'll try that.
Yeah.
And so I kind of bumped into journalism, but I never had uh, planned a career step before. I just reacted to opportunities that I had,
Yeah.
because the plan that I have was derailed just immediately. So
Right. Yeah.
then I was like, well, what am I going to
Right.
do? Right. And
Math and
so
science
then,
derailed a lot of people that I recall. So, but
yeah.
yeah.
And so then, and then I did this, what I was talking about drawing on, I'd drawn all along. And then I did this, a friend of mine named Brandy, uh, posted a profile picture of herself on Facebook that was, I thought was really pretty. So I thought, well, I'll try to draw that. And so I sketched a little portrait of her and posted it. And I was shocked. I was really pleasantly surprised it got such a nice reaction from so many different people on Facebook. And it kind of, light bulb moment. Well, maybe I'll
Mhm.
try being an artist. I'd thought about it when I was a freshman at Auburn, but I just didn't have the self confidence to try it. I never really considered that as a real possibility for a, a job, something you could make a living at.
You brought
I
up
didn't think
a
it was good
point.
enough.
Sure, I want to go back to something you said about self-esteem before we get into your taking off into art as a career, because I imagine when you left your career after 27 some odd years, like we said, without fanfare, without recognition, throw your badge in a garbage can at the door.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm imagining listeners relating to that if 40% of Americans have experienced or will. No
Hmm.
fanfare. And I know in my career, we would celebrate retirements as people chose to leave. There was always, a ceremony of people
Hmm.
leaving. This
That's
sounds like a
exactly right. It was
right?
almost a ritual when, before the time of the big layoff,
Mhm,
when someone would retire or go away, and especially after being there a long time, and a lot of people were a very long time. It was the largest paper in the state, and we were the best paid at that time, and so people just stayed for years and years and years. And when somebody would leave, they'd have a little party and have like almost like a little potluck dinner, and people would have
Yeah.
food and they'd have a little speech, and it made a big kerfuffle about it. And but then when our time came, it was just, you know,
Right.
get out.
So, so
And
and like
so it
you
was a
said,
big difference. And it
yeah, and
left
you
us kind of feeling just like, very unappreciated. At least it did me.
had,
And I think it did a lot of my colleagues.
and what, and that's what I was going. How did you navigate those feelings of unappreciated and that significant loss? Because I know what psychologists tell us about job loss when it's that significant time invested in a career.
Mhm.
How deep did you go in your feelings of loss?
Oh, it was, I didn't rebound as well as some of my friends did, that bounced right back and found another place, another niche. And um, because I'd already been feeling kind of misplaced. And when that happened, I was like, okay, I've ridden this horse until it died under me. I've gone as far as I'm going to be able to go in this. But then I was at that place where I just didn't know where I was going to step next. I didn't know what to do. And so when I said I'd always reacted to opportunities, that was the first time that I proactively chose a path that I
Mhm.
wanted to do rather than just stepping on something that presented itself in front of me. And so I decided to do that then. And I felt good about it. And um, anyway, so what, what
You,
part of it shall we discuss next?
yeah, well, I imagine were there was there a deep sense of loss, even though you started forging a new
Yeah.
path? Um,
Mhm.
would you even say you experienced depression on some level?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Because it's a lot of your identity,
right.
especially being a newspaper person. It's kind of a thing, there's a lot of camaraderie amongst the people you work with. I don't know if you know of John Archibald. He won Pulitzer Prize. He's one of the people I started off with. We were colleagues from the outset. I covered um, Walker County for a while right out of college before I got moved into the newsroom. And then when I got moved into the newsroom in March of 1986, that's when John stepped into the beat that I was in. Of course, he did a lot better in journalism than I did, going on to win a Pulitzer Prize. But that was, it's a lot of your identity. And when that's taken away from you, and that's all I'd done for almost 30 years, my entire career. And
Mhm.
really it was longer than that because I worked at the Plainsman at Auburn for 2 or 3 years before I graduated. So I'd been doing journalism before that. So really, it really was 30 years if you count the time at the Plainsman.
Sure.
And
So
it's a big
identity,
change.
financial stability, all of that, I think camaraderie, the workplace is where we spend the majority of our waking hours. So
Hmm.
all of those relationships. Um, so yes, depression is one of those, but this wasn't your first experience with a great loss resulting in
Right,
depression. You and I
right.
share a couple things in common besides having gone to RLC. We both went to
Hmm.
Auburn. We both majored in journalism. We both um, also sadly lost a child. So
Exactly.
take us back to that because if I understand it right, that might have been your first experience with great loss and depression.
Yeah, I probably had some mild depression all my life, but Um, our first son, Matthew, was born in 1994. He's 30. He's 30 now, and he'll be. So he was a little kid, and we were expecting our first child, our second child, another little boy,
Mm.
and we got up to full. He was due at the end of July 1st, 1999, at the end of June, and he was stillborn at full term, and looked just like our first son had. So it was that, and I might get upset talking about
Sorry.
But that messed me up for a lot of years, and my wife too. And I wasn't a good father for a long time. And finally, I got a counselor that helped me cope with it a little bit better. And but it's always right there, kind of with you, and it revisits less frequently, but it's always present. And so I'd always struggled with some depression because of that. And so then when you kind of the rug gets pulled out from you with the career loss, it's kind of a double whammy, I guess. I mean, it wasn't immediate at that time because we lost the baby in 1999, or his name was Silas, I think I said. And then, and the layoff was in 2012. And it was a few months until early 2013 that I decided to embark on this path. Right as I was going to turn 50 that year. So
Yeah. So lots of, well, thank you for sharing about Silas. My son's name was Jansen, and all of these things happened close to the same year. So thank you for sharing about that. But and that's one thing I was going to ask you was, did you cope on your own? Did you go and have some kind of help with that? And I appreciate your sharing that with our audience, because I do recommend that someone seek help with their grief, because grief is real and sadness is deep when we have a significant loss. And it's not something we have to bear on our own. There is some guidance that can help us through that so that we can
yeah,
navigate
it
the
helped
rest of our
me.
life.
I went to a support group for a while in the immediate, months after we lost Silas. And one thing that I discovered that's maybe is unique about losing a baby, I don't know if you experienced this, but it's very isolating, because if you mention that you've lost the baby, you get this feeling like people think you're looking for sympathy. And and but if you talk about it, they immediately try to change the subject, because I came to think that it's so awful for people to imagine and try to empathize with it. They just don't want to they don't want to go there in their own minds, and so they just don't want to talk about it. So you kind of feel shut out because of that. And I think that's the reason there are a lot more people around us who've suffered miscarriages and stillbirth than you ever realized, because people don't talk about it. And I think that's a big reason why, is because people don't want to hear it, and they'll deflect by saying, oh, he's in a better place now and stuff like that. And you don't want to hear that. It just makes you mad. And I don't know. There's just a lot of things about that's a whole other
Yeah,
podcast, I think.
it is. It is. I think because people don't know what to say, and they have to do what's comfortable for them. And sometimes it's saying nothing, which can be
Mm-hmm.
just as hurtful. Well, it
Mm-hmm.
is time for our first break. When we come back, we're going to pick up right where you left off with starting that career towards art after
Right.
that loss. And
Okay.
again, using your path rather than having it sort of just being what's in front of you or available to you. So we're going to talk about that and share your book when we come back. So don't go far. We'll
Okay.
be back with more Soul CPR.
Mike Zoric, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zoric, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zoric has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back, everyone. You are listening to Soul CPR on the Bold Brave TV network. I'm Ann Papayotti today with my guest, Brian Krausen. And we are talking about, from the new desk to the drawing board, how losing a job led to an artistic calling, literally. So Brian, you were talking about always doodle in your notebooks and all of those types of things. Did anyone ever notice your gift of drawing when you were young and comment on it?
Yeah, in fact, I had a few little drawings at one contest at one time or another, and um, it was always just part of who I was. It kind of ran in my family. My dad's mother painted portraits, and my dad could draw and he could paint, but he channeled all his artistic skill into engineering drawings and that sort of thing. That was his niche. And did I mention about what Daddy told me of when I dropped out of engineering, like
No,
we
what did
talked
he
about
say?
before? He when I decided that I wasn't going to go any farther with engineering, he said, "Well, I always knew you just wanted to draw airplanes. You didn't want to design them." And I didn't pick up on that as being a hint or a nudge towards art at the time, but in retrospect, maybe it was, and I just failed to um to perceive it as that. And
Absolutely.
but I did grow up drawing a lot and was complimented for it. It was like a hobby rather than something that was, you know, I should have realized some people make their career in art. There are people that do that.
Right.
And I just didn't think of that as a possibility for me because I didn't think I was good enough. Looking back, I think I probably was if I had gotten training at the right time. But
At the right
since I started when I did, I've kind of had to train myself and pay attention to mentors and try to figure out what media I was good at and how to use it and practice on my own that way.
I get it. Well, I ask you that because a lot of times when I'm working with clients and we're talking about, how do I know my purpose? I take them back to childhood and we look at what they were good at. What
Mm-hmm.
did they enjoy? And it's usually connected, just like you've connected the dots at the age of 50 moving forward. So um, let's go back to that Facebook drawing that sort of started this all in motion
Mm-hmm.
for you. Do you remember how you felt when you shared that first Facebook drawing and got that positive feedback that you were telling us about?
It was so surprising and gratifying to me to be able to that I had done this thing. When you do a drawing, you start from nothing, a blank page, and something comes out of your head and your hand, and there it is. And then for people to appreciate it is just a really um, gratifying feeling to have experienced that. And so, you say, well, let's try it again. And so I started drawing then after I decided I was going to do this and tried to focus on getting better. And I I'll I had discovered Joseph Campbell um, in the mid to late 80s and had started learning about mythology when I started studying Joseph Campbell. He was a philosopher and a scholar. He had a series on PBS called The Power of Myth with Bill Moyers, and that was my entry point into that area. So I'd been studying on mythology for a lot of years, and as I started drawing, I started having art ideas associated with that. And I started drawing these goddess portraits, and I did one and then did another, and pretty soon I had several of them, and the idea kind of germinated in my head. Well, if I could do enough of these, maybe one of these days I could make a book of them, like a coffee table book. And so that was kind of that was the focus that I took to keep, because I sold my art at a lot of sci-fi conventions. I did like what they call fan art and things like that, which a lot of artists do. But I wanted to do something that was mine, that rather than that I created from the outset. So that's the reason I decided to focus on the goddess art instead of just continuing to do that. So I would be doing something that was wholly my own, And it
Okay.
also kind of pulled in my other skill of the journalism and research and writing, because when I had one of these ideas, one of the things that Campbell said is that myth is kept alive by continuous recreation through the arts. And so I took that as sort of a green flag for me to say, okay, I can take this image, this archetype of this goddess, and kind of put my own spin on it, my own interpretation, my own take on it, and put that into my artwork. And I would do a little essay to go with it as like a caption when I would post it. And that's essentially what the book is the art plus the essay that I wrote to go with that art to sort of complement it. So the art is really both of those things pulled together, and that's what the book is.
That's
I've got
awesome.
the
So
book.
tell me about yeah, show us the book
Yeah, I
cover.
won't open it, but here's the
Yeah,
cover of it, and it's all
it,
Alabama models in it, and
that's what I was going to ask you. Tell us
cameras.
about your muses, the muses for your goddesses.
Okay, my wife is she modeled for two or three of the uh, ideas in the book, and they're all the people are friends and people that I know, and several of them modeled for several pieces in the book, and including some for what I hope will be the next book. And yeah, I felt like that was another measure of success for me, because we haven't mentioned it yet. I don't know, but it's a nude artwork in the book,
Mhm.
and when friends were believed in what I was doing enough. I mean, I showed them what I was doing, showed them my artwork, and I would always start with an idea sketch and say, "Here's the idea. What do you think?" And so they wouldn't be surprised at what we were going to do. And when they believed in me enough to kind of buy into that and invest themselves in it by modeling, and it's a very vulnerable thing to do. And I have the
Yeah,
highest respect for people who are willing to make the world be so vulnerable to make the world a more beautiful place, is the way I look at it. And so that's the reason I respect the women who model so much. And I'm so grateful to my friends who modeled. And, and a lot of times also they themselves inspired the idea for the work. And sometimes it would be an idea that they kind of, uh, hopped on. It's sometimes the idea started with the model, sometimes the idea started with me, but it was always some sort of matching up with it. I wanted to magnify something about that person's personality, because that's the idea of goddesses among us, that the goddesses of mythology represent the actual strengths and powers of the women all around us, of real people. So that's the reason I wanted to embody these goddesses with real people. So that's
I
kind of the
love it.
theme of it.
And that sort of explains the title, Goddesses Among Us, doesn't it?
Right, right.
Yeah. I had my freshman year roommate at Auburn was an art major. And I remember that she had these drawing classes where there were nude models to learn how to draw the human form.
Hmm.
And it was something that was, often talked about in her world and all of that. And so same thing. But how different is that from the mechanical drawing that you learn to do? Is it when you
Oh,
draw a human form versus a mechanical
yeah,
form?
it's just so much more. I mean, it's just so human, and it goes back to when I started studying mythology. One of the things in that is a lot of study of this Paleolithic cave art, which goes back There's famous caves, like the most famous one now is Chauvet Cave in France, which the art in that cave is like between 30,000 to 35,000 years old. Some of the oldest things ever found are about 40,000 years. And then there's one called Lascaux in France that's about 25,000 years old, I think. Um, and I studied a lot of that. And one of the things, it's images of people, and that's what is endured. We don't know what they were thinking. Uh, there was no writing. All we have is the art, but it still endures. After all that time, you can look at it and get a sense of what they were trying to communicate, and that you can feel something. And that I wanted to do that. I mean, mechanical drawing, it's the same abilities of being able to see an object here. I've wondered about that, about how we evolved that ability. And there's people talk about pattern recognition, making you more survivable to recognize a predator in the bushes or something. And that's why we can see images in the clouds and stuff like that. I think that's what gives people like me, when it runs in families, that maybe we have a, a little bit heightened sense of that. It makes us be able to do that. But people have been doing it for 35,000 years and doing nude art of women that old, and so that's how long it goes back. And so I felt like I was joining in a very long-standing tradition by doing that sort of artwork.
Well, it is time for our second break. When we come back, I want to talk about your art as healing, because you've endured more losses in life, and even your own very critical health challenge. And we want to come back and talk about how art has played a role in all of that. So don't go far. We'll be back with more with Brian and Soul CPR.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
And we're back. This is Soul CPR. I'm Ann Papayotti, and today I'm talking to my guest, Brian Krausen, who through job loss actually was sort of pushed back into a purpose that he recognizes was there all along, starting in childhood, a skill, a passion, and now a purpose. So, Brian, we talked earlier about the loss of your son, your at birth. But later and during this journey of starting your art and your collection of goddesses, you then had your own health crisis that almost cost you your own life. Then you, in a short period of time, lost your sister, your father, and your mother. How did that impact or influence or shape in any way your creative process?
It was a huge um, effect on my life. I had, as I was working for years over collecting the art for the book, I had this kind of a notion in my head for how I really wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a broad range, diverse range of cultures and races of goddesses from different places in the world. But I didn't have as much variety in it as I wanted to. And so I didn't really have a set end, goalpost for it. I had this vague notion in my head for how I wanted it to be perfect. But I could continue to work on it for years trying to think, I don't have enough yet. Well, in about 6 years ago, I had a colonoscopy, which a lot of us start to have in our 50s. And I had a complication from it and had a gastrointestinal bleed. And I went to the hospital with it. It was so bad. And when I was in the hospital, I passed out and they ran a code on me. My wife caught me from hitting the floor. And they couldn't even, when they all ran in there, my blood pressure was so low, they couldn't even detect my blood pressure. So that sent
Mhm.
me to the intensive care unit for several days. First and only time in my life I've been to intensive care. Well, I was still recovering from that about a month later when my little sister, who had had a long um, health issue for many years, um, she she passed away. She had liver failure and kidney failure, and she literally died in my arms of me and my little brother. And that was we just passed the 6th anniversary of her passing away. And then, like, that was 2019. And then the next year was when the pandemic started. And around the beginning of the pandemic, my dad had a heart attack at the beginning of the summer and struggled to get better all summer. And then when we thought he was about to come home, he took a turn for the worst and had another heart attack and died in September of 2020. So I lost my sister and then my dad. And my mother was already suffering from Alzheimer's. And when my dad was in the hospital, we took in my mother, and my wife, who's a nurse, became her primary caregiver. And my mother she was almost like an infant at this point as far as what she was able to do for herself. And she was with us for almost a year and a half, and she passed away too in early part of 2022. So in short order, almost like once a year, I lost my sister and my dad and my mother. My mother died in my arms as well. And that, of course, just the grief from of that series, bam, 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 was just overwhelming to me. But as far as my art, it was it's hard to describe the way that felt, because I wanted to be able to share the accomplishment of what I was doing with my family, with my loved ones. And I realized, well, I've missed that opportunity. They're gone, you know, and I wanted to be able to leave a legacy for my son and for my wife of something that I created. And that was what I was working toward with the book. And I mentioned to you, like, an example of what I'm talking about is one of the archaeology YouTubers I follow named Stefan Milo talked to recently about the handprints that you see in Paleolithic art going back, 35,000 years all over there's hundreds of them where people would put their hand on the wall and then blow like ochre paint around it to leave
Yeah.
an outline of their hand. And that's like saying, I was here, I existed. And that's the way I felt about my art, that I wanted to leave. And I thought, well, if I wait too long, I might never finish it. And here Jennifer won't get to see it. My mother won't get to see it. Daddy won't get to see it. And I didn't want that to happen with, anybody else that was important to me. I wanted to be able to share that and say, here's who I was. Here's what I did. This is what I thought was important. And so I but it wasn't perfect like I had envisioned. So I thought, well, what if I go with what I've got, but I call it volume one, which will imply that there's volume two coming, which will be more of to make it what I want it to be, with the broader range of diversity and in the people that are represented there and the goddesses that are represented in the cultures and the races. So I hope that that's sort of suggested and implied in the title of the book. It's a long, unwieldy title, but that's kind of the reason.
Yeah.
And so that kind
Yeah.
of gave me permission to go ahead with what I had at that point. And once I put the book to bed and got all its contents arranged, one of my dear old friends is a graphic designer. We worked together in a newspaper for many, many years, and he did the layout and design work on it and presented my work just beautifully. His name is Kenneth Carter, and grew up near you in Center Point.
Yeah.
and uh, then I kind of lost my thread what I was going for, but that
But
that's
you got the
the
volume
grief
one
is
done.
what pushed me to go ahead and finish it, is what I'm saying. That was the impact that the grief had. It's, I don't want to waste any more time by not and not be able to share this with people if I just fiddle around for too long chasing some nebulous idea of perfection. I decided to give myself permission for it to be imperfect and go ahead and get something done, is what
That's
is what
such a
happened.
huge message. Such a huge message. Letting go of perfectionism, embracing what is, following the purpose and the passion to be able to leave the contribution and the legacy, as you said. And I think that's so important, and something when we face our own mortality, as you actually did, and then experience the mortality of those people so close to you. And it actually drove you to move forward and
Exactly.
allow it to be a work of completion rather than an ongoing project, that might still be ongoing, if not
Hmm.
for those experiences. So, in that way, I'm sure there's some healing that happened because you actually did go to publish
Hmm.
in
And
this
it was
volume one.
it came out. I self-published it with a company called Book Baby, and I went with them because they put it on all the other sites, like it's on Amazon and other sites. But mainly, most of the buys have come through Amazon because that's such a big pool. But um, yeah,
Right.
that was about a year ago. And can I talk about the rewarding part of it now? Is this
Yeah,
a good time for that?
please
The
do.
one of
Sure.
the most art for me has not been as financially as lucrative as my journalism career was, but it's been really rewarding to me when I connect with somebody, when I can tell that they really understand what I was trying to do, what I was going for. And one of the maybe the best example of that I can think of happened a little less than a year ago, because it was not long after my book came out, and I did an event that was on South Side. It's just a little afternoon art fair with a group of artists and selling. And I had my table set up. Suzanne was with me, and I, have my prints spread out on the table and in bins. Usually, I put the nudes in a bin so people, won't be alarmed by the nudes when they just walk up. So they have to look through the bins. And here comes two women and a little girl, about 12 or so, walking up toward the table. And I thought, oh, well, they're probably going to be distressed by the nudes. They won't be here long. But they started looking through them, and they looked and looked, and I could tell they were interested, the things they were saying. And uh, the woman, the who I think was the mother of the little girl, picked up one of the pieces out of a bin, and she looked at it, and I saw which one it was. And I said, would you like to hear the story behind that one? And it was a piece that I called She Who Is Healed, and my friend Kate modeled for it. And the genesis of that one was that Kate had an episode of a skin cancer scare, and uh, she has a scar on her arm where the skin cancer was removed. And she had told me when we were brainstorming ideas for art just wandering conversation about how after she had this scar, that she was dismayed when people sometimes would talk about it like that's something ugly you need to cover up, that's unsightly, shameful in some way. And she was kind of offended by that. And I thought, yeah, I can see why. And it made me think about some things I'd learned about this Japanese art of kintsugi. Kintsugi, I'm not sure of the pronunciation exactly, but it's when they take like a broken cup or a broken plate, some kind of porcelain, and they mend it with gold. And the idea is to make the break makes it more beautiful than it was to begin with. And so I did Kate's portrait, and I made the scar kind of luminous gold, like kintsugi. And that's the piece that was called She Who Is Healed. And so this lady sitting there looking at it, and I told her that story. And without saying a word, she lowered the strap of her sundress down and showed me a scar.
Well, I'm going to show you my scar. I have one there. I don't know if you can see it on camera, from skin cancer. And I have one here on my chest from skin cancer right there. So thank you for sharing that story. What a beautiful way to explain some of the stories of your goddesses. And it is time for our third and final break. And we will be back with more with Brian and Soul CPR.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Thank you for tuning in today. We have had a lovely conversation with artist Brian Krausen, and we're going to have just some closing comments now. Brian, what advice would you have to listeners who have dealt with job loss or depression or any of the types of things we've talked about today?
The thing I've thought about this, and the thing that I would suggest, not that I'm a superb example of anything, but having gone through depression, and I think a lot of artists especially struggle with depression, is at least the ones among the ones I know, my friends. There are times when you just can't do anything, when you can't produce, you can't draw, and you kind of are inert. But I ended up finding more persistence than I knew that I had. And I think one of my biggest suggestions or takeaways is to give yourself some grace, to be patient with yourself, to um, be patient to get through those times, and then just come back to it. Just keep coming back to it. And that's what I did. And it took me a long time, but I finally did finish it. And it's just persistence and patience with yourself, patient with the individual piece of art, and then patient with the long goal too. Patience with that, to be able to not say, well, I've waited too late, I can't do it now. But no, just keep coming back and keep hitting at it.
It's never too late. Is the same with writing. And if you had well, this was volume one. What's next in your
I've
pipeline?
already gotten about 10 pieces done toward volume two. Another thing, that the book was designed where it's going to be complemented by what they call oracle cards. People have told me for years, you should do tarot cards with your art. It reminds me of tarot cards. But then I researched that tarot cards are very specifically organized. And another friend of mine said, you should do oracle cards. And I didn't know what that was. And she explained to me, it's basically, my understanding, sort of freestyle tarot cards. They're used the same way for like reflection, or just to collect as art pieces, or some people use them for divination, or just as a meditation point. And so um, I have an oracle card deck that I'm planning, and I'm finishing up on the last piece for it. And those will be like bonus cards in the deck, in addition to the art that was also in the book. And I'll have that, and then I'll continue to work on volume two of the book as I get more portraits done.
Fantastic. And if people want to find your book and your future books or connect with you, you mentioned
I have
Amazon.
yes, my website is called artbybriankrausen.com, and on my social media I've tried to keep the labeling consistent, my brand consistent with Art by Brian Krausen, so you can find me under that on Facebook and Instagram and Blue Sky and Threads, and that's what my art sites are called. And if you can go to my website and you can buy individual prints and see a lot of the art that's in the book. But in the book, you have the context of all the essays and everything, and you can kind of see the overall picture of what it's about. And you can also order it on Amazon, and they've had it on sale recently.
Yeah, and I have the book, and it's very tastefully done. So when we say nudes, it's tasteful, it's beautiful, Brian. I love it. I love that Suzanne modeled for you, your wife.
Mm-hmm.
What a gift that is, and happy anniversary, by the way, to the two of
Thank
you.
you.
You have to give the secret. What's the secret to your long-standing marriage, Brian?
The patience thing, I guess, comes into that too. Just continuing to prop each other up through those difficult times, and taking turns doing that. She kept me from hitting the floor when I had that episode in the hospital, and I've done the same recently for her when she had a little a health problem. So we literally have picked each other off the floor, both literally and figuratively, over the years. So we'll keep doing it as
I'm,
long as we can.
I'm sure. So looking back, do you see the job loss as a blessing in disguise?
Um, yes, in a way. I felt like I needed to do something different, and it gave me the opportunity to do what I think I was best suited for. I think this is the confluence of the things that I'm best at, of my skills and my talents. So, and I'm trying, expressing myself with that. My voice is now in my art instead of just in my writing. It's a combination of the two. So I
Yeah.
feel real good about that.
So, for listeners who've lost their jobs or are afraid to pursue their passions, or maybe somebody's clinging to something that's familiar and holding
Mhm.
on really tight, even if it doesn't fulfill them, what might you say to them?
It's very freeing in a way to be able to just go after the thing that you really feel driven about, that you're most passionate about. Now, my wife supported me through all this, and I couldn't have done it without that. So there are considerations to do it, but you can still go after the thing that really moves you the most and makes you feel the most passionate to do.
Absolutely.
It's
Even
been
if
good
it's
for
a
me.
hobby, keep it up. All right.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Well, Brian, it has been just a pleasure to have you on the show and to reconnect in this way that we have. And we need an RLC reunion. Wouldn't you agree?
Sure.
I think we're going to have to do that. Maybe this will be the spark for that. Well, I do thank you for being here, and I thank our listeners and our viewers for tuning in today. As this episode of Soul CPR comes to a close, remember that healing is not a linear journey. It is a process of profound transformation. And if today's episode resonated with you, then please share it with someone else who might need a lifeline of their own. Subscribe, rate, leave a review to help us reach more hearts. And you can find all of Brian's contact information in the show notes for today, as well as my contact information. You can connect with me on Facebook at Skyview Coaching and on all the other social media platforms at Ann Papaiotti. It's hard to spell, but you can find it. Let me know your thoughts, your stories, and your ideas and topics you'd like to explore in future episodes, and we'll make them happen. The show is for you. So thank you for listening. Until next time, may you find strength in your vulnerability and courage in your journey. Always breathe deeply, love openly, and live soulfully. Good day, everyone.
This has been Soul CPR with host Ann Papaiotti. Breathe life back into your spirit with each episode, where she and special guests explore the relationships that hurt us and discover that healing can only begin with you. Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.